All right, everyone, this is just a little bit of a reflective piece. Now, first and foremost, let me say this. I have difficulties with political categories because I'm smart enough to see past false dichotomies. For instance, left and right in the sense Americans generally hold them to be, like the great mass of people that aren't interested in learning more about politics. They're just sort of partisan or whatever, or they're ideological zealots. Left and right in the sense that they declare it don't actually exist. It's a false dichotomy. There are many other possible political affiliations that offer their own solutions, their own platforms and ideologies that they disclude. They don't even talk about them. They don't know they exist. They don't know anything about them in some cases, or they think that they're like fringe, fanatic, and therefore they use a little bit of a logical fallacy and they dismiss them because they're too far outside of the Overton window. So a false appeal to moderation, I believe it's called. That being said, though, at some point you have to realize that because the majority of people perceive the world in that false term, it still does have validity within the subjective human experience, within the sense of human understanding within the vast core of people. The concept of left and right as broad banners under which people gather do actually matter. They don't matter to somebody like me because I can see that they're not real, but because they're taken up as true by so many people, they do, in a general sense, they have validity in the sense that people will tend to amalgamate under that banner, use those terms to describe themselves while sharing at least some views in common. Like you would expect. People who consider themselves to be on the left, typically they're not going to want immigration reform. They're not gung-ho about guns. They may tolerate, the concept of self-defense, but they're not going to be like, rescind all gun control, haha, probably. And even though it's a stereotype, it generally holds true. The idea is that with stereotypes, something that is applicable 90% of the time, you can't apply it to any specific individual and necessarily be accurate, but you can statistically apply it to the broad bulk of a group of people. That is, the numbers don't lie, but it doesn't have to be 100% true in any individual circumstance. So when I see that the left has become so much measurably more abusive than the right, as self-described, people who describe themselves as anti-right, socialistic, democratic socialists, communists, liberals, Democrats, when I see that the bulk of people there is statistically, as a whole, more abusive, more given over to censorship, more given over to stupidity, and less intellectually honest than the broad bulk of people on the right, it gives me pause. And gets me to the point where you have to admit, if you're intellectually honest, and I am, I have no choice but to admit that at this point, within the subjective human experience, the left, self-described, is objectively worse than the right. Therefore, my tendency in such a situation, regardless of my own personal beliefs, is to tacitly side with people on the right, including the fringe right. Look, because I come to this conclusion. When I look online at people talking to me, I can see all sorts of examples of myself being abused or others being abused by people who they have like a Marx avatar or something like that. I see relatively less of that from people who proudly self-proclaim themselves to be on the right. Now, some of that's shilling, but statistically speaking, I don't think it's 10-to-1 shills to real leftists. I'm thinking that's probably a logical stretch at this point. Funnily enough, here's the big takeaway. This wasn't the case. It was almost even Stevens. Most of the leftists that talked to me at all, they were like, how can you believe this or something? But they didn't like immediately open up with a volley of insults like, oh, you're a fascist or something. Oddly enough, it isn't until I debate an ethno-nationalist publicly, when I debate Richard Spencer, that this begins to happen. Isn't that very strange? And so my message to the left at this point is this. It's obvious that people on the left are not capable of rationally debating ethno-nationalists. You're not capable of it because you immediately crumble into emotional appeals that, remember, I've tried to tell people this. They don't fucking understand it. If you're debating someone, you're not trying to convince the person you're debating. Like, if I'm debating Richard Spencer, I'm not trying to convince him of anything. If I'm debating some communist, I'm not trying to convince them to abandon communism. I'm trying to structure the things that I'm saying and intoning in such a way that the unbiased observer who's actually open-minded sides with me more than the other person. That's the point of the debate. What the left does, though, is get so emotional and self-righteous that they're incapable of debating at all. Anyone who watches that, they say, oh, you know, it's just basically a crybaby. They don't understand logic. They don't understand reason. And while most other lay people probably won't care about that specific side of the argument, they can tell the difference in behavior. It makes you look weak, honestly. So they're incapable of debating the alt-right. That means they rely upon people like me to do it for them, because they're too intellectually weak to actually accomplish that. But because they immediately turn around and begin defaming people like me and saying, well, you know, you didn't immediately do what we would do, which is come out and start saying, oh, you fuckface, I can't believe that you're an ethno-nationalist, you're such an evil Nazi, you should be strung up by a tree. They act because of their virtue signaling tendencies, they come out and will attack the person that's actually pitting a reasoned argument against an ethno-nationalist. So you know what, to the left? Fuck it, I'm not going to help you at all, and I encourage all other people who are not strictly part of the far right and say, well, you know, Heil Hitler or whatever. Don't bother debating the ethno-nationalist. Don't even bother. You know, you may think, oh, well, you know, there needs to be balance, and, you know, authoritarian is authoritarian. Okay, yeah, granted. Which side is trying to abuse us? At this point, which side is trying to censor independent content creation? It's not the ethno-nationalists. It's the left. Like, can we be honest here? There comes a point, I maintain my own beliefs. Like, some people misread what I posted last night. I said, because of the way the left is acting, I'm going to ally with the far right, basically. That doesn't mean that I take up those beliefs. It means I'm looking and I'm making, in my opinion, an objective, valid judgment of the general behavior of the vast bulk of these two groups, so-called. I'm not being abused by people who say, I'm ethno-nationalistic, I'm a civic nationalist, national capitalism, national whatever-ism. Nobody in that group is abusing me. Look, I have a conversation with them. It can be friendly. We can disagree. We can agree to disagree. But at the end of the day, we can still have a conversation without flinging shit at one another. Can I, at this point, do that with the average person who considers themselves a leftist? The number of leftists that I have communicated with in an amiable way is shrinking, and most of those people are pariahs within the left, like an H.A. Goodman. H.A. Goodman is a progressive. He's very far to the left, generally speaking. He's also a pariah among the neoliberals because he dared to criticize the Clinton campaign and the DNC. He said, well, you know, Bernie can probably, I disagree with this. He's like, Bernie can win, Hillary Clinton can't. And they hated that because they're like, oh, you're trying to demoralize us. You're a secret right-winger. I would be surprised if they didn't like try to cast him off as like a Russian agent or a Nazi or something. Like, they'll call anybody a Nazi. Like some Jewish commentator at this point subject to being fucking called a Nazi. It's dumb in every possible way. It's totally intellectually dishonest. So why on earth would I want to look at the behavior of the left, which is basically a group of chimpanzees throwing shit at everything that moves, versus the ethno-nationalists who are like, hey, you know, we want like free speech and we want to be able to debate people, and why is it that nobody's willing to debate us without using rational arguments? There's a huge difference in the behavior I see. I'm sorry, but objectively speaking, the behavior is totally different. What the fuck am I supposed to do for the rest of my life? Pretend that they're equivalent? The authoritarian tendency may be equivalent, but the thing is, the far right's not in power. Now, that's my worry. Like, my worry is, as this paradigm ends, as the right continues to rise, as I expect that it will, and becomes establishment eventually, then it becomes more authoritarian, but it's not right now. No, I see, like, people... when's the last time, for example, that an ethno-nationalist said, oh, yeah, I think that YouTube censorship is a good thing, actually. People need to be policed for hate speech. I don't think that I've heard that from anyone on the further right, but I hear it every single fucking day from the left. I even hear it from the center left. Why the hell would I want to partner with you? Yeah, I'm not going to fight the battles of the left for it. Fuck them. And trust me, they need people who are capable of debating without immediately devolving into baby talk and emotional appeals. Now, did any of you take a course in logic? Is there a single alt-leftist who did? No, I think you were too busy with women's studies or you know, how to grow soybeans or something like that. That's not the way forward. That's not the way to win over a whole paradigm. Are you crazy, dude? It's just like when the evangelicals... This was said, I think it was 84 at the time. I used to have this uploaded to YouTube. I took it down, everything with the Radio Werewolf music, which, you know, they were called Nazis too at the time, which is even funnier. Now, because then they said Nicholas Schreck was like, like cross-dressing vampire or something. So there's a little bit of overlap, a little bit of funny cultural similarity for a new era, I think, a new generation. At the time, he said, well, we're not too worried about the evangelicals because, they're basically playing the devil's game at this point. They've sold out. The reason why they seem prevalent is because they speak loudly and they've sold out. They've become commercialized in an effort to sort of fight the Satanism, the moral panic. They sold out and became everything they were fighting. This is what happens to such movements. When they pretend to be morally outraged, they devour themselves. It's inevitable. It can't happen any other way. I am telling you, for people hedging your bets, with the establishment status quo being, left-leaning in all general aspects, if you are hedging your bets with them surviving the current paradigm shift, you are wrong. You're going to be disappointed. You shouldn't be hedging your bets. You should be hedging your bets with the right wing. Now, it won't be a purist variant of, oh yeah, we're going to form our ethno-state. No, but it will be an amalgamation of different opinions that will lean to the right. That's then we simply have to see which of those opinions gains the most traction. Smart money says one thing, each group says another. It's impossible to tell specifically. Regardless, though, at least during its formative stages, it's likely to lean towards libertarianism in the moral sense. It's not going to become immediately authoritarian. The people that are worried, oh, the ethno-nationalists will take over and immediately start throwing people in concentration camps. Trust me, it's not going to happen. Historically speaking, within the context of the United States, or maybe post-World War II era Europe, it's not capable of happening. Within the legal framework and the structural cultural framework that we have, it's not going to occur. What would happen, though, is that the left would love to pile books together and burn them if they maintained control any longer. Thankfully, they're waning. I look. And what I'm saying, I can show you is true by the comments that I get from people who self-proclaim socialism. I'm a proud social justice warrior. I trigger right-wing snowflakes and stuff. Most of the comments that they're leaving are simply emotional appeals. Oh, yeah, I had someone last night. I just blocked them at this point. It's like, I'm not going to bother giving them attention. It's like, if you want to be a titty baby elsewhere, basically. One of these people's like, oh, it would be better off for the world if you and everyone like you died in a bus crash. And it's like, yes, I'm sure. This is why you are losing. I don't know if you realize that. Why do you think you lost, for instance, the last election? It boiled down to deplorables. That's all. You can sum it up in a single word, deplorables. This wraps up, Hillary Clinton was talented enough to encapsulate the entirety of the alt-left in a single speech. It's actually quite something. The censorship, the Pepe stuff is racist, Hitler worshippers, males are evil like sexism, white people are being racist, you don't know what's good for you, you peasants, just vote for me and let me make the decisions for you. And by the way, I'm going to control the media and get them to say the same thing. It's the same bullcrap. And when I see, by the way, that the same boring, outdated, inefficient, establishment-controlled edifices like a CNN or MSNBC are completely on board with the alt-left and have no problem with it, when I see CNN say, oh, socialism's cool again because of Martin Luther King Day, yeah, that gives me pause, dude. It's obviously not a grassroots movement. It looks like you're a bunch of fucking sheep to me. You're the kind of morons that I was fighting against from the other side during the Bush administration. Like, when I was reaming Republicans sometimes, I'm like, how the hell can you support this? Like, tens of thousands of people are dying, troops coming back with PTSD, we're wasting money, the economy is going total fuck mode. How can you possibly support this? And ultimately, eventually, it became a bunch of emotional bullshit aimed at me, like, oh, you're a pinko, you're not patriotic, something like that. That's what it boiled down to. And then they lost. A few years later, they practically disappear. There are no Bushites left, practically. What did Jeb manage to accomplish? But fuck nothing. There's a reason for that. What do you think's going to happen to the current paradigm with the neoliberals? They're suffering. They're suffering bastards. They're going to die off as a movement. The sick man of politics, you could call it. So yeah, I'd rather side with the alt-right, yeah. I would rather talk to people who are like literal Nazis, because the literal Nazis, oddly enough, they're not the ones burning books. The people they're arguing with are. The people that are opposing them are the ones burning books and saying, let's censor and disarm, and government is great and noble and there should be more of it. I'm scratching my head as to how you can associate the modern ethno-nationalist movements with Hitler. when you are in fact stressing stuff that is far closer to the NSDAP than anything that they've suggested, including those that take up the banner of actual National Socialism, and most of them don't even appear to follow that. They're like, far right in the conservative sense. Now, like they warped the curve, they went further right than Crowder or something. By the way, Crowder's a funny guy when he's talking about Zhang. So no, I don't want to abuse anybody, and I'm not going to discriminate against or hate people. That's another conflation that's made with, the generic identitarian movements. But I'm not dumb. I can sort of see, it looks like one of these movements is the abusive one, and it's not the far right dude. Yeah, the golden one's not trying to censor people. Varg's not coming out and saying, delete your YouTube channel, I want to deplatform you. Tara McCarthy's not coming, Greg Johnson, Richard Spencer, these people, they're not the ones trying to shut up debate. They're the ones willing to debate others, including myself, but I'm not going to even bother to do that. I would rather just have a friendly discussion, because at this point, because I'm not part of the left, I know that the further left is going to write a hit piece against me anyway. Like Jared Holt, he sits there salivating and he wants to write like a smear piece. Well, he's going to do that anyway, so why the hell would I care about his moral judgments? Look, his paradigm is ending. That paradigm, that's not the cool kids of the new generation. The new generation is leaning further and further right as the left becomes more and more prone to all forms of statist abuse. It's as simple as that. When you can't even post a meme online, that sacred act of shitposting, when you can't even do that without being called a Nazi, that's when you know they've really, really gone way out into left field. And they don't even realize it. They don't even realize how many dead ears their arguments are falling upon. I think it's wonderfully funny. It really is at this point. So yeah, I'd rather communicate with people on the right. Again, there are still people on the left, like an H.A. Goodman. I respect them. They're not trying to deplatform others. They're part of that one candidate there. Can't remember who his name was. Sort of a leftist, but also deeply anti-censorship, and the neoliberals are going the wrong way. I can't remember who it was. I think that was several years ago, actually, though, so never mind. There have been people like that within the Democratic Party, within, self-proclaimed liberaldom. But they're a minority voice, whereas it's the majority opinion of people on the right. Like the evangelicons of the past that were actually abusive have been drowned out by the new right in all of its various aspects. This includes the generic new right, the anti-censorship front, the ethno-nationalists, the civics, the libertarians, and more on the minarchist side usually, sort of the Ron Pauls, the populist movements. All of these things gathered under the same banner fundamentally seem to agree on the concept of censorship. There are very few people in that group that want to even suppress what they see, in some cases as outright degeneracy. They're like, well, this is degenerate, but at the same time, it's not as bad as what the left's doing. Who fucking cares? The left, meanwhile, is like, oh, this person wants to build a wall. We should deplatform them. It should be a crime to say, MAGA. It should be a crime to say sovereignty is an okay idea. It was sacrosanct and considered common sense 10 years ago by even the liberals. But now it's evil and bigoted because times change. And that's not the way it's going to work, dude. You already had your paradigm. Your paradigm is, you don't get to make up the next paradigm. No, your opponents do. That's the problem with such movements. So they'll sit there, and all of the alt-leftists will morally harangue and say, Holocaust denial for you, Nazi for you, you're a sexist, you're an evil, you're ignorant, you're just a Trumpanzee. Okay, let it roll off you like water, because most of the time those terms have lost all meaning anyway. Like, bigot no longer means anything. Bigot could mean, hey, you expressed a view that some random person on the left found to be bigoted. Well, that's just their opinion. Just fucking ignore them and don't even respond. I'm not even going to have dialogue with these people anymore. It's not worth it. Half of the time they can't even speak coherently. And they want to sit there and talk about how Trump can't speak. It's like the funniest thing I've ever seen. That's about all. Peace out.